Will it blend? That is the question. I'm the founder of Blendtec and the executive chairman of the board. Blendtec is a result of an evolutionary process because it really started with the development of a grain mill, a home grain mill. Because of the success of that, which I thought at the time that's going to be the big market, but because of the power that we had in our motor and the speed of the motor, I thought, well, we may as well, it's a great platform for the best blender in the world. So we put a blender jar on it. And then we found out that people were more interested in blending than they were in making bread. And so that led to people using our blender commercially. It took us to the very best scoop shops, ice cream shops in the world, the best coffee shops, and the best smoothie shops. We really didn't understand marketing. My belief was that if you build the best product, that people will beat a path to your door. With the Blendtec name on the product, I thought this is great. People are going to go get the best drinks they've ever had, and they're going to realize this is coming out of a Blendtec blender. And so I thought everybody's going to call us up and they're going to buy these blenders. Didn't happen. What originally took us internationally was Starbucks and other companies like Starbucks that grew very rapidly internationally. And it was wonderful because they have to use our blenders. I mean, they're the best blenders. So before we knew it, we're in China, Tiananmen Square, the Great Wall, Forbidden City. There's our blender in coffee shops, in scoop shops, in smoothie shops. So we just kind of went for the ride, and we had to establish our own service in those countries. So it's kind of a pull situation where, okay, your blenders are going to break eventually. What are you going to do to support it?
When we had Starbucks as a client, they wanted us to support them in their global expansion. And so we were essentially pulled around the world, told where we were going to service machines and which partners to work with. And that was sort of our first sort of entry into international markets. The same with Costco. Costco asked us to support them globally, and we've agreed to do that. Not very strategic in our approach initially, and so that was sort of our first entry into global markets. We had never done a full analysis on the cost of doing business even in Canada. There wasn't an operational strategy or really even a long-term strategy on what we wanted to do in Canada. And so we've started looking specifically at phases of growth, and there are specific triggers that we're looking at in terms of units sold or profitability or revenue. We're using Canada as a model because it's easy to do business in Canada relative to other countries around the world. So we think that if we get it right in Canada, about 80% of what we do in Canada will transfer to other markets. There's a lot that goes into entering the market. And I think what we've done well is that we've allowed Costco and Starbucks and some of these other global players to open doors for us and help sort of drive us into these global markets. What we've not done well, though, is really capitalize on their brand. So we should be able to leverage Starbucks and leverage Costco in these international markets. We should be able to leverage our competitors. We have a couple of competitors who've done very well internationally, and they've essentially greased the wheels of commerce, if you will, in this particular category. So we should be able to leverage all of that. A lot of the education's been done. It's just a matter of us now capitalizing on that and ensuring that our clients understand that the benefits of using a Blendtec blender as opposed to our competitors. In terms of market entry strategies, there are many. We look at market entry perhaps a little differently, and that is that market entry is not just the fact that we've sold one blender in a country. We could, I guess, claim that we sell in that country, but the reality is we've not really entered that market. And so what we're looking at, 4 different phases. Phase 1 is essentially that we sell a blender in a country. Phase 2 is how do we support Once we get to a specific level of penetration, a certain number of units sold or a level of revenue, then how do we support our customers in that area? Typically, you start on the commercial level, which is what we've done with Starbucks. Phase 3 really is about making a decision on whether or not we want to invest further in the country. Do we want to have our own warehousing, our own logistics, our own refurbished? What's our distribution strategy other than just going through commercial and Costco? So all of these things are part of what I do every day on a country-by-country basis. There are specific countries where it's very difficult to do business. Even if you look, the UN and the World Bank, they have a list of countries where it's most difficult to do business, and Brazil is always in the top 3. It is very prohibitive. They're very regulatory based. They're very consumer protectionist, which I can't necessarily disagree with, but they're tough to do business. And so there are workarounds in most of these countries, and one of the secrets of doing business in Brazil is Mercosur. Mercosur is the trading bloc for South America. There are countries where the United States has a trade agreement with, but they're also part of Mercosur. And so there's ways to leverage that relationship where we can have easier access to Brazil without the prohibitive, not only regulatory pieces, but also the cost, the import tax and duties. The most attractive markets for us are markets that we've identified that have similar purchasing habits and buying power as the United States. And so we've selected a top 10. Canada is one of our top. We have Europe and specific countries in Europe that are on the top of that list. And then we've identified some APAC countries that are on the top of that list, and certainly Mexico. We think Mexico is a hidden gem. Many of our competitors haven't focused on Mexico either. And so we're looking at that as a really strong market for us with NAFTA and with our ability to leverage proximity. And certainly initially, 100% of our revenues came from the commercial side of the business. We were a commercial-driven company. We're an engineering company. We engineer the best products in the world. So I think over the last 25 years, it's slowly done a reverse. We're about 70% of our revenue comes from the retail side of the world, and 30% comes from the commercial side of the world. In terms of leveraging Starbucks and the Costcos of the world, it certainly helps. In the commercial world, it's very interesting. People in the commercial world know the power of our blenders, and so we don't really have to leverage a Jamba or a Starbucks. But when you go and meet with a Macy's or a Bloomingdale's, if you can say that we have Jamba on our books as an exclusive client, or Starbucks or Denny's or any of these other commercial clients that we have, it definitely affects the relationship. They look at it as a big positive for us.
As we go to these various countries around the world, we find that we really have to understand their culture. And one example would be that we talked to people about what color blenders would be popular in Japan. They said, well, the ones you don't want to have black, you don't want to have white, you want to have bright colors, your red and things like that. But then when it came right down to it, the buyers said, we want black. In Asia, everybody's into small portions. And so we thought that, okay, there's our 4-sided jar. That's bigger than most people's jar. But no, as we rolled out retail, we found that they wanted the wild side jar. I mean, this is the family size jar. This is 3 quarts. They wanted the big jar and they want the black color. And so that's what we did, and it's very popular, just because it's different.
When we were doing translation for Mandarin Chinese, you would think, I think as a layperson, that there's really no difference between Taiwan and China. They're both speaking Mandarin Chinese, but in fact, there's a lot of difference. And so you say blender in Chinese, mainland China, differently than you say it in Taiwan. And so when we were doing translation for mainland China for a Taiwan product. And we luckily caught that before it went out. But there are lots of small nuance that to us as Westerners might not seem that important, but for the markets where you're entering are critically important. We're going through a shift within the culture of Blendtec now, where 100% of revenues came from a domestic market, and that's again beginning to shift. And in the next 5 years, I'm I'm confident that if we do things right within Blendtec, 70% of our revenues will come from international markets and 30% will come from domestic markets. People need to wrap their heads around that. We just have to make sure that we educate internally about the importance of these markets and different buying habits and different features and different selling points.
At Blendtec, we've learned to be listeners. We listen to our international partners. We have to be very nimble. We have to be able to change, not be upset, but go with the flow, change as fast as we can so we can please our customers, both retail and commercial.